I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera, but has chocolate stains. Last time I let my kid get snow caps at the movies. The Incredibles 2! So I have now seen it. As I alluded to, I took my daughter. So I was really nervous going into this. The entire concept of a sequel to The Incredibles, which honestly, I know it kind of technically ended on a cliffhanger, but it didn't really. It was a pretty complete experience, start to finish, and I was nervous about the very concept of a sequel. And then I saw the first trailer, and I was like, oh god, this looks like it could be really bad. And having now seen the movie, it's pretty good. It's not as good as the original. I'm not sure anyone actually expected it to be. But most of the stuff that I was really nervous about based on the trailer actually worked pretty well. That's not to say that everything worked. There are some issues, and I'll get into them. But I'll start just by picking up on the stuff that I was really nervous on based off the trailers. Like, I didn't like that it was looking like things were going to be all Mr. Mom with Mr. Incredible at home taking care of the kids while his wife was out. So that plot actually works pretty well. Partly because it does not eat up nearly as much screen time as I was afraid of. It's very much the B plot, and its screen time is reflective of that. So that helps. If they put more emphasis on it than it had, that really could have hurt it. But the other thing is that it's not just about him learning logistically how to handle his kids. He also has to actually grow up and mature a little. I would argue more than he did in the first movie. He actually has to confront the fact that he's kind of a selfish prick, which in a way this movie deals with head on without ever feeling like they're having another character sit down and lecture him on what a jerk he is. But like early on, he encourages his wife getting involved in superheroing again so that it can improve the reputation of supers, which means he'll get to superhero again. So he wants to support his wife so that ultimately he gets to benefit. It's not about supporting her in the abstract. So between that and sort of realizing what he needs to do in relation to his kids to get this working better, he does mature as a character a surprising amount. I actually kind of got to tip the hat, I'll do it literally, to the Mr. Incredible storyline. And it also had most of the better humor. Jack, despite, the surprise of all his powers being gone, was still good for some good slapstick, super-powered slapstick. And, it's fun and it's funny and it's amusing. It was definitely some of my daughter's favorite stuff was the Jack stuff. The other two kids, Violet feels like she gets the short shrift, although I think she's actually got more of a plot going on than Dash. But in an odd way, I feel like that almost hurts her more. Dash doesn't really have a subplot of his own, but the thing is, he doesn't need one. He's there doing his thing when it's appropriate for him to do it. They try to actually give Violet a subplot, and I don't know, it just never feels like it comes together. And then there's a lot of kind of oddities about this film. One of them is that I had actually forgotten that the family didn't see Jack's explosion of powers at the end of the first movie. Only Syndrome did, and he died. So spoilers for Incredibles 1, I guess. But the rest of them didn't see it, and that hadn't really occurred to me, that they didn't realize he had powers. But then when Mr. Incredible sees him exhibit powers fairly early on into the movie, I'm like, oh, that's right, they didn't know. But then he doesn't tell anybody, so we keep getting, it's like every half hour or so, another set of characters find out that this kid has powers, and all these characters are going, he has powers? He has powers? I'm like, what? Can we just get everybody on the same page? Because we as the audience have known this for the last 14 years, and we have to continually keep watching the cast catch up. I guess it's supposed to be a running gag, but there isn't really a joke there. It's just a really long, just very drawn-out process of everybody finding this one piece of information out. Another thing that was really weird, there was something off about the look of basically every character who wasn't a repeat from the previous movie. And it took me a little while to, like, I'm watching going, something's just not quite right about these designs, about these faces. And what I realized once Evelyn, the character of Evelyn, showed up and I saw her and went, oh my God, she looks like she's from a DreamWorks movie. And that's when it hit me. They went with all the new characters slightly less stylized versus the very angular, very stylized look of the characters in the original. So the repeat characters still have that because obviously they need to look the same as they do before, but all the new characters, they're slightly angular, but by and large, most of them are more realistic. Like, not photorealistic, but they have more touches to them to try and make them look, quote-unquote, like real people. And it results in just, they look like DreamWorks characters. They look like the human characters from Aliens vs. Monsters or Megamind. And it just looks weird. And I don't know if I'm alone in that. I can't think of anybody else having mentioned anything like that. So, maybe I'm crazy? I'm probably crazy. I may not be crazy about this though. So that was the other thing, and I know that sounds nitpicky, but aesthetically it kept bugging me. A fair number of people, or at least critics, have cited the villain as being a weakness. I don't think that's actually true. The villain is not as good as Syndrome, because Syndrome was a brilliant villain, you know, really good in and of himself, and also super thematic for what was going on. The villain here is works, is functional, kind of has a cool gimmick going on, and when we get into motivation, the degree to which, like, the origin for this villain is brought down to like a single moment and the amount of sort of blame put on specific elements of that, I think pushed it a little too far, because up until that I actually thought the villain had a decent enough point. And actually some of the things that go on with the villain in a way kind of, I don't want to say deconstruct, but sort of feel like, at least to a certain level, they are addressing some of the sort of latter-day criticisms of the first film that have come up. It's in that the original film has a little bit of an objectivist philosophy. This one feels like it's critiquing that position a little bit, which feels nice. Oh, another thing that I thought was going to be terrible was Edna coming back. I wasn't looking forward to that at all. Edna Mode was one of the highlights of the first film, but I was so paranoid. I'm like, this is going to be one of those characters that you brought back because she was funny the first time, but there's going to be no reason to bring her back. It's going to be a total retread. And on paper, that's true, but it just kind of works in terms of how they sort of ignite her interest as a character. It actually works. So I was kind of impressed by that. I think the other thing that's the real major strength of this is the action scenes. They do some really inventive stuff, especially with Elastigirl. They really do show how cool a power set that can be when done properly. We also get a much better variety of superpowers on display, because it's not just the recurring characters. We get introduced to a whole bunch of new characters with a whole new sets of powers, and some of them are just cool. Some of them are neat powers in and of themselves, and then even ones that seem like, oh, that seems kind of basic, then get used in pretty neat ways. So I props to them on that as well. But I think the other thing, and I had this thought on my own, but I feel like I have to bring this up because I was there with my 6-year-old. It's a little long and a little draggy. Movie's almost 2 hours long, and about an hour into it, my 6-year-old asked me, how much more is there? That's usually not a good sign. And my kid was enraptured all the way through A Wrinkle in Time. So, you know, she can handle long movies. She can handle even things that aren't like nonstop action, but it was kind of stretching it a little bit for her. And I think it is a little longer than it needs to be. But overall, I would call this one a pleasant surprise. I went in, I've really started to dread sequels to films that didn't feel built for it. Like, I look forward to, you know, Marvel Cinematic Universe movies because every movie that they make is designed with potential for the next one. That's not to say that every film that does that always works. I cite Marvel because I think they still tell pretty complete stories, but also leave very obvious room for further growth. You know, building something for the sequel and nothing else. That's how you get Amazing Spider-Man 2. But, you know, with something that feels like it's a complete story and it doesn't inherently warrant a sequel and it didn't really lay groundwork for a sequel, which I feel is the case for The Incredibles, I've gotten really nervous about those kinds of sequels these days. They can be really, really painful. And this didn't hurt. And I don't feel it tarnished the original either. So I would call it a win. It's not amazing, but it's good. So I'll end it on that note. Have you seen The Incredibles 2? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts were, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's all the stuff to do. Like and subscribe, and find me on Twitter and Patreon and the podcast when and if I get around to doing something with that. I'm working on it. Links for all that stuff and more is down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.